I was taking a walk a few days ago and was listening to an audiobook called 10x is Easier Than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And this is a book essentially about how exponential growth requires a reframing, a change to the way we think about ourselves and the journeys that we're on. And in it, Sullivan states, and I'm paraphrasing, the things that brought you to the current moment will keep you there. Powerful. In a lens through which I hadn't really looked at my personal growth or journey before. I've always thought of progress as a stacking of repeatable habits over and over again. And while this may not be wrong, Sullivan and Hardy make a pretty effective argument that it's only part of the story. See, if you show up and you do the exact same thing every day, you'll get growth, no doubt, but it will be linear in nature. Exponential growth requires instances of self-recreation, of evolution as we make our way forward. It's a continuous pushing aside of things we don't need to be doing and a simultaneous deep dive into the things that bring us the most return. They use the example of the famous Michelangelo, who is known for his paintings, right? And then some time goes by and he produces a 17-foot statue of David. And then he pivots again as he's commissioned by Pope Julius II to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and then moves on to direct even larger projects. And each example here is a 10x evolution. Certainly not a road that could have been mapped out from day one. How would he ever have known? But it's a series of sometimes even lateral moves. Instances of following your intuition, your strength, doing what felt right? Instances of breaking down and building back up the self. Same foundation of talent and skill, same general competency, but he continuously stacked new and enhanced versions of himself on top of one another. Sometimes reminders hit you exactly when you need to hear them. Personally, I loved everything about this message. The idea that there should be more emphasis and courage, for that matter, on one's 10x trajectory, multiplying my strengths, on taking the value I bring to the world and putting it through some stressors, seeing what comes out the other side. Because the danger in playing it safe, which the second we stop being intentional about things is ultimately what we tend to do, it's that you don't experience that transformation. It was not safe, using the same metaphor from Michelangelo, a painter, to create David. The safe thing would have been to keep doing the same thing every day. But you have to trust your skill, your heart, and your intuition. There's immense value in all of us understanding that, and to some degree, emulating it. There's value in all of us finding our David. Stepping into that which is a little unclear, makes us a little nervous, but at the same time allows us to take the skills and talents, the parts of us that are most meaningful, and inject them into the world in a bigger way, which would never have been possible had we stayed the same. The things that brought you to the current moment will keep you there. Well, here's to finding your 20%, that which matters, and using it as the template with which you paint. Not getting so stuck in the routine that you forget the routine is a means, not an end. You have the ability in your own unique way to change the world around you. The question is, do you have the courage to reach for it? Here's a mental shift that's provided me with some clarity, particularly when things don't happen right away. As we all know, the good things don't. Validation is stubborn. It'll take its time. So, positioning for that, putting yourself in the right mental state as you chip away, is huge. And the idea is, every day you move forward, it's not about the revolutionary, life-altering change in the now. It's about the continuous building up and positioning of oneself for an opportunity to come. In other words, the monumental opportunity is out there. It does exist. And you will inevitably cross paths with it. The question is, will you have grown as a person? Will your skills have been sufficiently developed? Will your overall competency have been elevated enough so that you're ready to receive it when you do? That's the thing about opportunities. They only matter if we put ourselves in position to receive them. And part of what motivates me every day is the fact that I'm chipping away at those opportunities to come at some point in the future. Opportunities I can't even, understand or fathom in the moment. But the reason I'll be able to capitalize on them is because of today's groundwork. And that's the point here. That's often when life feels heavy, what pushes me through. One of the most spectacular things about human beings is that we can delay gratification. And I don't mean in order to live a miserable existence. I mean putting in work, knowing that 1, 3, 5 years down the road, there's going to be things available to us that otherwise wouldn't be. That's why one of my favorite conversations was, around my friend Evan saying he hates being asked what his 5-year plan looks like. What will life look like, Evan, 5 years from now? It's like, I don't know, right? I have a direction I'm pointed at. And I'm working every single day to bring that to life, but who knows how many twists and turns life will take? Who knows about the opportunities that will present themselves when they align with my goals and my competencies at a future date? I'm not going to limit myself or deprive myself of those. You build the man, build the woman, hour by hour, day by day, and know that life rewards capable individuals. That means the power is in making yourself more capable. Probably my favorite quote, Nietzsche. Those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who couldn't hear the music, is about that very idea, right? Trusting that if you build yourself up, you stay focused, you take an axe to the tree that is your purpose every day, by the way, to the sound of no applause, to no awards or pats on the back, you will ultimately succeed. Because in doing so, you position yourself to receive opportunities that otherwise would have passed you right by. Sure, they would have been there, but they would have been beyond the scope of what you could handle, right? That's just a reality. Building oneself up is like an all-access pass to the show that is life. In becoming more, you can see more, you can do more, you can access more. That's why, as the saying goes, it's not about getting what you want. It's about the person you become along the way. Becoming the type of person who can do those things, who is deserving of those things. So when you're frustrated or down, when you're looking around and saying to yourself, there's still a substantial gap here between where I am and where I'd like to be. Know that you showed up. You did the work. You stacked another sheet of paper on that pile. At the time, right, not enough to make a visible difference, but over time, sufficient to stand on, right? You win the day by stacking that sheet and moving forward. You win the day by understanding that you are more capable, more knowledgeable than you were yesterday. You've taken another step forward in positioning yourself to receive those opportunities that will come. If you hang in long enough, they always do. And when they do, you'll think back to all those days of frustration, those seemingly anticlimactic occurrences, and you'll be grateful that you saw it through, that you weren't frustrated or discouraged by the now, but rather saw it as the bridge to infinite opportunity. That to find ourselves requires we must first lose ourselves is, I believe, life's greatest paradox. Leaving that carousel of comfort, the predictability of what we know, the certainty of who we believe ourselves to be, for a promise with no real guarantee of being kept, well, it's nothing short of irrational. Are the odds in our favor? Perhaps not. But by stepping off, by placing our bets on a different track with a different prize at a different time, we have increased those odds from 0 to, well, I guess we decide. And see, the world teaches us that it's advantageous to spin. A spinning carousel is predictable, it can't be cheated, there's very little room for loss, or humiliation, or setbacks, or even life to get in the way. You know where you start and you know where you end, and that's just the thing. This spinning world is so easy that people don't want to leave. In fact, it's not until you walk away from the crowd that you even face the unknown. And that's precisely why it's so hard to walk alone. It's hard, it's challenging because of the now. Not because the now can't be measured or understood. No, we get it. But because there's this little whisper in the back of our heads that the now might go on and on and on forever, that check will never be cashed, the summit never reached. No, just footsteps down a perpetually long, windy road. And that's, when maybe, just maybe, we miss that carousel. We miss the safety and security. And that's what sometimes makes it such a stressful thing to walk alone. We think about all of ourselves, our mind, our heart we've left behind along the way. Truths we now have to face, things they never taught us on that carousel. We had to learn that we were wrong about who'd be by our side through it all. We could no longer hide behind the notion that when things got tough, someday everything would be there, would be the same. We learned to swim by jumping into the deep end, seeing in real time that people only believe what already exists, what's put in front of them, that ideas are empty, that a dream is a language only spoken by its creator. And if you want it to mean anything, you must dedicate your life to translating it. We learn how much is backwards, how much of life is reactive, that success is being one of the few who don't react, but build a world to react to. And in the thick of it all, to internalize the process, because talking does nothing. Plans are just potential energy confined to your pocket. You have to be okay growing that seed by yourself. Like a runner making her way past a crowd, right? The crowd sees calm, sees peace, sees the finesse of an athlete gliding over the pavement. They have no idea the war being fought behind her eyes. The silencing of constant whispers to slow down, to do less, the repression of pain that consumes her to such an extent it can't even really be pinpointed. It just kind of floats over her body. They'll never know that. And what we learn is that they don't need to. It's the truth. And see, it's also what makes it quite lonely to walk alone. Walking alone, well, it's a lot of things. But it's never boring. It's never dull. And if you can hang in there long enough without even noticing the headwind you've been fighting, it becomes a tailwind. And where we may have felt alone, the idea pops into our heads that maybe that's not quite right. If anything, the wind at our back is now momentum. It's a partner along the way. That carousel, yeah, it's still spinning, but somewhere else. Some far-off place beyond our field of vision. And no, things don't ever become easy. We wouldn't want that. But difficulty is interpreted differently now. Not a burden, but a cost, and one we'd gladly continue to pay. And that space that once felt so empty, so desolate, so helpless, well, now it's made up of people who see what you see, who hopped off their own carousels and wandered through the desert. They too navigated through the impossible and the never been done. It's funny how at some point we always find each other. And I suppose now, having traded the carousels for the adventure, we can walk alone together. Us against the world. Standing up in defiance of the odds, chasing that glimmer of hope. All in on a pursuit to find what most won't and see what most can't. Not because we were made different, but because we chased down the idea of different. It gets a tough rap walking alone. And in so many ways, it's a fight. It takes all of you. But you don't come out the same person you were when you stepped in. The same person you'd still be today had you stayed on that carousel. So if you are still spinning, step off. And if you have, if you're still adjusting to the discomfort of reality, if you're making your way through the hell of uncertainty or questioning whether you have what it takes or have the strength to commit, I promise you do. In fact, you're right where you need to be. So don't be distracted by those screaming of their successes or communicating, capturing every small win as they make their way around the carousel. It's the quiet ones who change themselves. The ones who take life one step at a time, one battle at a time, who redefine reality. And I'm sure you can't see it now. No one can. No one can see the sun amidst the storm, but you'll emerge. Stronger than you ever were. You will navigate towards the ideal and away from that life you once settled for. It's a long path, but it's worth it. So get up and let your feet guide the way. Let's go walk alone. What goes into your decision making? Particularly the big decisions, the important ones. I heard a quote that moved me from Jeff Bezos. It was a video on Twitter, and he said, "My best decisions in business and in life have been made with heart, intuition, and guts, but not analysis." And he continues, "When you can make a decision with analysis, you should do so, but it turns out that in life, your most important decisions are always made with instinct, intuition, and taste." And that connected some dots for me. Right? Because I think the big decisions, the life-altering decisions, where we are pointing the ship, should be made via intuition. Data can't tell you which direction is most important to you. And even if it could, if your heart's not in it, if it's not aligned with who you are and where you feel you need to be, it wouldn't really matter anyway. Like the most important decisions we make, even right out of the gate, there's this feeling of it's aligned or it isn't. We know right away. We feel it right away. Someone once said to me, if you can't decide if something's good or not, flip a coin. Because you'll know while that coin is in the air which side you want it to land on. And we do. We know. And so after deciding, after letting intuition guide us, then and only then, in my humble opinion, of course, do we calculate the how. That's the analysis part. Once we've committed and our hearts are aligned, yeah, you use the data all around you, the evidence collected along the way to map an efficient path. I think people tend to put the heart and the brain against each other as though they're rivals. I know I certainly have, but I think they need to coexist together. Think about it. If you select your North Star based on analysis, you'll probably lack the drive to get there. And conversely, once decided, if you map the course based solely on heart or feel, you'll be operating blind, limiting your ability to make accurate adjustments based on real-life circumstances. You need both. I'm making some pretty substantial changes here in my life. I'm moving again, this time to Arizona, starting up some new ventures, placing myself in a few situations that weren't even on the radar 6 months ago. I can't explain my rationale using mathematical models. Right? I just know deep in my soul that it's where I need to be. It feels right. It's calling me. The same way 10 years ago, writing speeches in a small Boston apartment for no revenue at the time couldn't be explained. Can't show your work on a decision like that, right? It's just something that feels good. And, once you jump in, then yeah, you start relying on the brain, the analysis to grow and improve and evolve. But I do believe if we made the big decisions based only on the things we could prove or the things we were sure of, the biggest and most important leaps would never have been made. Risks wouldn't be taken. I mean, you don't take risks because you run the numbers and the odds work. You take risks because life is, when you break it down, remove the nuance and details, about the journey. It's about the ride. And so you jump. You commit to a path. And maybe you realize it's not the path for you. Let's say things don't work out. Well, now you are gifted that wisdom. Understanding you previously never had, right? And you can take that all with you onto the next venture. How do you put a price on that? How do you quantify lessons of that magnitude? What data tells you how important that courage was? We all know the answer. Now, of course, again, data has a story to tell, and numbers don't lie, but they also never tell the whole story. They can't paint the picture in its entirety. Which is why I'd scream from the mountaintops, if it means something to you, it's worth exploration. If it matters, try. If it lights up your curiosity, give it attention. Maybe it doesn't work the way you thought or hoped, but it will lead you to the next thing. And then the next, and the next. It will provide the type of value that simply can't be quantified or even understood in the moment. The story of your life must be written by you. It must align with the person looking back at you in the mirror. That's the litmus test. That's the benchmark. So trust yourself and your intuition to write it. If you want to do yourself a monumental favor, start today. That thing you've been dreaming about, that ideal state, take one small step now. Because I promise you, there'll be a point down the road where you thank yourself. It's just hard to see in the moment. In fact, it's funny how things only make sense in hindsight. Our greatest accomplishments are the result of those little unsure, sometimes uninformed steps we took years back. Decisions we made, quote unquote, back then. And how powerful to think that one choice you make today can ultimately become your back then moment. Your inflection point that changed it all. You are constantly, always, every day, navigating a world that contains the pieces for creation. You're an architect, able to build at your discretion. In those current moments, with a vision and determination, will they transform into the back then moments that start everything? One video, poorly edited, sloppily put together, released to the world without aim or direction, was one of my back then moments. A conversation I initiated with someone who has since changed my life, a back then moment. Choosing to move or adjust or stop or start, all back then moments. Those critical inflection points that change everything. The things we need most tend to, not be a surprise to us. I think all of us, whatever they are in our own individual worlds, we're aware. We know what needs to be done. The challenge is friction in making it happen, right? Either we're scared in the moment, or that road to the ideal state seems like a road too far to walk. We're so consumed by what we don't have that we never give those back then moments a chance. We never initiate and let them materialize, thinking that you have to know everything before you step out your front door. And this idea changed my life. You don't have to know how things will play out. When you're starting something meaningful, the fact that it feels right or interests you alone can be enough, more than enough. It's a calling or invitation to move into the abyss. That powerful proverb so many of us have heard, the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. It's like we need to start unrolling the red carpet. Because what we'll learn as it unfolds will change us. We'll zig and we'll zag, we'll adjust, make mistakes, sometimes have to backtrack and correct. But none of that happens without step one, right? Nothing happens until you give yourself permission to begin. There's a saying, do one thing every day that scares you. Why? Because you learn to see past the facade that is the fear of starting. You come to understand that without going, there's no change. Without change, things remain how they are, and in a world that only gives you what you ask for, What a tragedy to exit empty-handed. To have had so much opportunity and let it slip by. And this is a message I've delivered a million different times in a million different ways. I do that because, one, it changed my life, and two, I still need it. I need the reminders. It's not like fear goes away. No, I'd do the thing I'm scared of, it would become normal, and without my knowing, I'd create a resistance to doing the next uncomfortable thing. Right? That's the friction that we'll always have to fight. And it's a good fight to take on. Doing one thing every day that scares me reminds me to keep pushing. Not because of how it'll make me feel today, but because of what I'll become tomorrow. You know how rewarding it is for me to do things like speak on stage? Calmly, confidently tell a story or share my voice? 15 years ago, I was so bad at that it was just cringy. It was humiliating, right? But that's not the universe saying no. That's the universe extending a hand and asking if I want it. Like truly want it. And if no, fine. But if yes, then what was required was for me to open that door and step out. Practice. Be vulnerable. As years go by, those quote-unquote back then moments made me who I am today. And I can tell you that I'm proud and grateful that I stepped into that chaos, and everyone has some version of that. And it comes down to an understanding that someday you'll not only thank yourself, but be overwhelmed when reflecting back on your personal transformation. Sure, not a giant leap, but the courage to start and a million steps after that point. Some brought value immediately, some took a little longer, left you with wisdom, but it all meant something. So remember, if you want to do yourself a favor, start today. Begin the beautiful journey of growth, of adjustment, of evolution. Who knows where it'll take you? There will be highs and lows and everything in between. But one thing that is for sure is you'll emerge a different person. A much different person than you would have been had you stayed. The world, it needs you. But it needs the real you. Not the one with the mask, looking to blend in. Nor the one making all those concessions to avoid being left out. No, the real you. With your flaws and your insufficiencies, your strengths and your gifts, your hopes and your dreams. It needs the you that so often hides away underneath that blanket of caution and skepticism. The you that's coupled with vulnerability, more easily ignored than brought to life with conviction, but that's the you this world needs. When I was younger, I seemed to separate life into two categories. Me in one, and everyone else in the other. And guess which of the two categories I assumed had it all figured out? In my mind, I was the one, the only one who didn't know. The one who was winging it, stumbling my way through each and every day. All those other people, though, they not only had plans, they had the right plans. They knew the right details. but I didn't. And so in my head, me being right required I necessarily look to them. I follow their lead. Since there exists an established correct path, that must be where I steer the ship. But then some time passes. You grow older, maybe pick up a little wisdom along the way, and you realize that no one really knows what they're doing. There are very few objectively correct roads that must be traveled. Life is not a paint by number, it's a blank canvas. And understanding this changed the image in my head from one of me knocking on the door of a party everyone else was at to visualizing almost 8 billion individual souls running around trying to figure things out in the limited stretch of time they have here on planet Earth. I realized I had at times felt small only because of the gravity I attributed to people who were just trying to figure it out themselves. And the point, certainly not to diminish anyone else's journey, it was to give myself permission to embark upon my own. It's just hard to do that when you view everyone else as one collective, all-knowing entity, as opposed to 8 billion people just like you with thoughts, fears, hopes, and plans. The question is not what is the right thing to do here. The question is, when will you allow yourself to venture out into the world and find what the right thing means for you? That's what's required. And the world will be better for you having found it, because after all, no one sees life like you do. No one has the background or worldview. The universe has conspired to put you as you are here now. Almost an impossible occurrence in and of itself. How easy that is to forget. We were born on the summit, yet the inclination, for some reason, is to keep our eyes closed. No, open them. Take it all in. Allow the view to propel you forward. The world needs you. It needs you with your mistakes that have helped you evolve into the person you could never have been without them. It needs you with your worries and your fears. Conquering them will be pivotal in your evolution. It needs you with your flaws and blemishes. How else would life convince you that the things that make you different are the same things that make you strong? It doesn't matter how many people tell you or try to explain to you the magnitude of what's at your feet. Life does not begin until you allow yourself to start living. Until you realize that yesterday does not define you. And the categories in which you've placed yourself, they're transitory. The past is not the reason you can or can't begin again. It's not who you are forever. No, it's the advantage you now possess as you move forward, should you choose to move forward. It's in realizing you are bound by nothing that you free yourself. And for the one wondering, why does it matter what I think? Why should I start or try or risk anything? Why should I pick up the brush and start painting on that canvas before me? Well, because that step is where it all begins. The meaning, the purpose, it's all predicated upon our willingness to pick that brush up and start painting. You ask, what's the point? The point is everything. One detail at a time, we dismantle our previously held notions about what life is supposed to be and finally start living one that matters. No one's masterpiece will look like yours. No one's depiction of life will follow the same parameters you've etched onto that canvas. In fact, there are people that will be changed forever because you chose to live your life fully. There are lives of those around you that will be transformed because you picked up the brush. There are stories that will now end in triumph because you found the courage to start, to see light in yourself. You being fulfilled and the world being better off, they're not two different things. When you live a life true to yourself, when you let go of the have-tos and step into the get-tos, the world experiences the luxury of the beauty that comes next. When you fill your cup up first, you're able to then replenish those around you. That's not nothing. So who are you? Beneath the characterizations, beneath the roles you've taken on, beneath what you feel you're supposed to be, all that. Who are you, and will you give life to that person? Will you be that courageous? After all, that's what life is. It's not a game of right and wrong so much as it's a game of courage. The ones willing to take the leap end up worlds away from where they began. So my ask of you is that you begin tearing down those walls created in your head. The ones that accumulated over days and months and years. The ones that box you in or keep you out, that suggest you are anything other than that 1 in 400 trillion miracle, ready to embark upon the ride of a lifetime. And sure, it means shedding the comfort of obscurity, the safety of projection. Looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I am worth it, and there's more out there, means without question you are taking off the training wheels, dancing with vulnerability. But it also means when that time comes, you look back on how you lived your days, you can say, I truly lived. You can say that the world needed me, and I had the courage to heed its call. The other day, I went to check out an open mic, and basically people sign up to share their short stories, their poetry, stuff like that. And I'm sitting there, soaking it all in, enjoying each one as they went up on stage. And eventually this girl makes her way up. The first thing she does is she tells the room, hey, I've never done this before, but I've always wanted to, so here I am. She takes out her phone, begins reading some of her poems. And pretty quickly, two things stuck out to me. One is she was brilliant, like just so incredibly talented that I'm thinking, man, if she keeps doing this, she's gonna find herself in some crazy places. She's really gonna make an impact. That was the first thing. And the second, as I sat there and watched, was that I noticed that her hands were visibly shaking. I was pretty close to this stage. And I could see this happening to the point where she had to place one on top of the other, right, to keep the hand that was holding her phone from bouncing around while she read. That's how visibly nervous she was. And immediately my mind went down this road, reflecting back on the moments I've had just like that, because man, I've been there. where you're both determined and terrified at the same time, but somehow the desire to try outweighs the fear just enough for you to find yourself in that exact situation. Just enough that you step into a foreign world, still wondering whether you made the right move, every step of the way, from the car, the building, onto the stage, until you hit the point where, okay, well, now you can't turn back. Now you're here, you can't leave. And the thing is, and this is what was so beautiful to me, she was never forced to do this at gunpoint. No one made her step into that chaos. It was self-created. She could have stayed home. She could have closed her journal or the notes app on her phone, and that would have been the end of that. But no, not today. Today, one yes would lead to another, and another, and despite the nerves, the sweaty palms, and shaky hands, she would open a new chapter in the story of her life. Prove to herself that she's bolder than she thought she was just a few hours ago. That there's upside when you confront those unknowns in life. And as I sat and watched, I was so incredibly moved, so proud, so impressed. Partly because I know that to many of the people in that room, it might not have looked like much. It's like, okay, great, round of applause for the new artist or poet. Welcome. But I knew the gravity of the moment. I understood how big it truly was. And regardless of what words came out of her mouth or how well they were assembled, that night was not about the performance. No, it was about new beginnings. It was about outstretched wings, opening one's eyes to the learned helplessness and pinpointing the opportunity that was simply waiting for that first step to occur. And see, that's what I want to emphasize. That's what I believe every single one of us needs to understand, to fully get. The biggest moves we make in life, well, it's easy to convince ourselves that they aren't necessary or worth it. The things that transform us hide themselves. A lot of the time, they don't feel urgent. They aren't life or death decisions. They can be the stages we never step on, the people we never talk to, the chances we never take. Because, well, what happens if we simply stay right where we are? Say thank you, but no thank you to those fleeting opportunities. Nothing happens. More of the same. And realistically, nothing is far less scary than all that other stuff. We don't fear nothingness. We don't intrinsically fear more of the same. No, we fear stepping onto the stage. We fear vulnerability. We fear messing up, looking stupid, being judged. And yeah, when you do nothing, you get to skip all that, avoid all that discomfort and that potential pain. But you also miss the feeling of victory, of closing your eyes at night knowing how badly you wanted to just let that ship sail, how terrified you were about what could go wrong, but you did it anyway. You get to feel you have earned the rush of stepping into a chaotic world. And even if temporarily you tamed it, that's what life is about. Always remember that we have a natural proclivity to avoid pain, not to pursue the things that make us feel alive. Deep down in our DNA, there exist instructions to run away from the things that could hurt us, embarrass us. Our minds will race, our bodies will kick and scream, our hands will shake. That's just the way it goes. Until we prove to ourselves that it's all conquerable, that reality can be relearned. It's a layer of resistance that has to be faced and then dismantled. Why was I so moved that night? Because I got to watch in real time someone dismantling that fear on their way to something incredible. It's courage. Stepping into the arena, not for the people next to you or anyone else, but for you. Because you know there's more. You know that where you are pales in comparison to where you can be. I'm definitely one to look back from time to time and reflect, and I'll tell you what, I'm incredibly thankful for the hard times that shaped me, the challenges that were forced upon me and made me who I am. But beyond that, and perhaps even more so, the times I stepped out on my own accord, terrified and manufactured change. The times that the fear of staying the same eclipsed the fear of failure. The times I could have stayed home, woken up the next morning and lost nothing, but instead saw what there was to be gained and threw myself into that metaphorical fire so that confidence could be forged and new chapters could be written. Let's all remember how out of focus the present moment looks. Remember how inclined we are to look at life through a lens of scarcity. We are trying to avoid, but if you can, even briefly find the strength to step back and ask, what is there to be gained? You see that not going is the real danger. And those stages that seem arbitrary, that seem like optional stops along the way, well, they're just as imperative as the air you breathe. They are not some things, they are everything. We all hit a point where we look back on the roads we traveled and see the culmination of footsteps that have come to constitute our lives. And we want that moment to feel full. Like no stone was left unturned, like we put it all on the line. So will you step onto this stage of life? Stand your ground as the curtain opens, read your poems to a foreign audience. Will you share your voice even though it trembles? Because if you do, you're giving yourself permission to truly live, to feel. Look, we're not here for a long time. This is a very short ride, so why not give as much of yourself to the world for as long as you possibly can? Why not step out knowing that the difference between nothing and everything is what you do with shaky hands? There's a saying that just because you spent a long time making a mistake doesn't mean you need to continue making it. There's an incredible advantage in life for those who can separate past and future, who can recognize sunk costs and walk away from the past, move on to new things. But here's the challenge, right? Like so many things, our instinct is to preserve. Yeah, but I've invested so many years. I've spent X amount of dollars and maybe I don't like where I'm at, but look how long it's taken me to get here. Well, here's the reality. That time is gone. That money is not coming back no matter what you do or what direction you take from here on out. There's no reason to think you have to maintain the same trajectory or hold on to a specific identity or pattern of behavior. Yesterday isn't the focal point here. The goal is simpler. What matters now, and how will you get there now? You've grown, you've evolved, you've changed, and your targets have shifted, so why shouldn't you? The idea of sunk costs is so important because it's essentially realizing that you're not indebted to the resources you've spent or exhausted. There's no need to be a slave to previous decisions that you've made. No, just chalk it up as an integral step in your learning process, an aspect of growth, and move forward to what matters, to what you care about. And if that seems obvious, I challenge you to think about the decisions you've made over the last year, and I guarantee you've let factors affect your decision-making that are irrelevant to your goals. Because we feel this camaraderie with yesterday, like there's a debt to be paid, but man, life is too short to run in place. If it's not pushing you forward, drop it. If it's not what you need, forget it. In other words, don't be one of those people that wakes up and makes the same mistake every single day because you've spent a long time making it. See, reality only exists in your head, and that's why it's beautiful. You can unlock the cell door and walk out. Don't lose sight of the greatest gift you have. The new beginning that lives in every second, where you can take a turn you've never taken before, remove the mask and play a role you've never played. Let that sense of excitement pull you to new things. Let go of what you can't change and pursue what you can. Forget the time spent. Think of now. Where can you invest now? Your surroundings didn't magically arrive. You chose them, and you can just as easily take that wheel and leave. Simple formula. What is best for you, and how do you get there? Not where you feel obligated to be or expected to be or pressured to be. Where do you need to be? Everything else is noise. Everything else is a rope keeping your ship on shore, and you are not confined to that harbor or yesterday's destination. You're built to chase the horizon, follow your curiosity into the sunset. You don't make decisions based on yesterday's story. You sculpt it with tomorrow's possibility. We are, in some ways, helpless to what occurs around us. There are things that are beyond our control. But the gift we possess, our power, if you will, is the ability to determine what we let in, how we internalize the externalities. We are responsible for being the gatekeepers of our minds, protectors of our worlds. There's a little saying that I aim to live by. It's incredibly simple. Basically, the idea is, if something is not a net positive on your life, start working to eliminate it. If there's a person that is draining, creating more negative than positive, then they don't deserve to be in your world. Stop letting them in. If there's some place you're going that doesn't align with what you value, start working to eliminate that destination from your day to day. Stop letting it in. If you find yourself constantly thinking about worst case scenarios, it's always, well, what if this goes wrong or that goes wrong? If you find yourself missing the opportunity and instead spotlighting the problem, Start working to identify and isolate those thoughts so that they can be eliminated. Stop letting that stuff in. The great part about having so much control over our lives and our perspectives is that we get to choose what gets our time and attention. The tough part, though, and it is tough, is that it means we also have to ask ourselves questions that perhaps we don't want to ask. We have to be honest with ourselves, like truly honest. And the reality is sometimes it hurts to do that, to ask, how am I contributing to this pain, this struggle? What am I letting in that needs to be kept outside the gate from now on? And what we often find is that the answers are there. The opportunity is there, sometimes even in plain view. But our attention is often diverted from it and instead allocated to the things that don't even serve us or align with who we are. We've habitualized finding the problems and not the solutions. And I can list examples of this over the course of my life all day, right? Epiphanies where I realized I needed to defend the thoughts that enter my mind and better cultivate a world where I can succeed, where I can be happy. Money, for example, the switch from seeing it as a scarce resource, something that everyone's fighting over, how to outmaneuver the guy to the right of me, how to get my hands on this elusive object. Nope. Block that mentality at the gate and let in instead the idea that money is merely an exchange of value. How can I be more valuable to more people? Where value goes, wealth follows. Or as I've talked about before, the injuries I deal with so frequently, right? Keeping the poor me, or I can't deal with this, or whining, I'm willing to put in the work, why won't life let me succeed? Keep all that outside the gate and let in, here is an opportunity to get better in other areas. I can't lift. Maybe I'll take a month or two to crush cardio, to eat better, to build mental acuity. Find a way. Or maybe it's that person who made their way into my life that over time became a net negative. That we've gotten to the point where our coexistence takes away more than it adds. They no longer belong inside the gate, in my world, right? Only let in people who do make your life better. And we have control over all of this. It's about accountability. It's about personally understanding the authority you have over what comes in and what stays out. Very few things in life are just because. Things exist in our day-to-day because we have, somewhere along the line, allowed them to be there. So take some time to see yourself as the gatekeeper of your world. Audit what you're letting in and what you're keeping out. To do so will set you up for a life on your terms. A life that's not wasted, or even merely endured, but one that's lived to the fullest. Remove the lifelines. Eliminate plans B, C, and D. Let the curtains close and the lights dim. See, the beginning of something new requires the ending of something current. So make life propel you into chapter 2. Let the doors slam and lock behind you. Throw away the key. With the boats burned and turning back off the table, we have to make it work. We have to figure it out. Well, how, we might ask, with only these pieces, with only this circumstance, with only these resources? Well, it's funny how when walking away is no longer a possibility, so many other possibilities are born. When we're stuck between the wall and our demons, we roll up our sleeves and do that which we have been, let's face it, running from. We fight. We become proactive. We take initiative. It was always there. We just never had to. So if you can't do it on your own, make life make you. Because the bottom line is there are new horizons that await your arrival. They are always there. But they require you to make the trip, to look out over the vastness of what's before you and convince yourself that what's ahead can become your new normal. And oh, how I wish we weren't biologically preconditioned to preserve, to stay safe, to stay the same. How I wish we weren't constantly being pulled to stay right where we are. Our minds, they love it here. With the rest of the world, the change, the hope, the progress, all on the other side of that window. All outside, all foreign to us. You don't need any of that, it'll tell you. Or maybe, after you conjure up a little courage, it might compromise. It might say, fine, it's worth a try, put one foot out the door, but don't forget you can always come back to me. You can always retreat. It's warm here, safe here, it's predictable here. The mind wants you to know that when things get tough, mediocrity and comfort are always right behind you, ready to embrace you with open arms. And it's for this reason that those boats must be burned, that the door must be locked, and that chapter must be closed. The journey before you, it's going to be difficult. There's no question about that. Anything of value brings difficulty. And when faced with the adversity, the only way to defeat it is to know there is only one way, one option available to you, and that one option is forward. It's through. There is no backwards or compromise. There is no safety. Not if you want from life that which is extraordinary. Not if you want the things we covet, dream of. Whether they're interpersonal, financial, career-oriented, health-related, maybe you just know in your soul that right now ain't it. Any move to something better will present to you its obstacles. And my advice, if it's what you really want, is to have decided before you started that there is no other way. There's no negotiating with yourself. Because if you allow that door to be cracked, life will kick it open. So point the compass north and dismiss any notion that what's comfortable is more important than what's meaningful. When you're cold, nothing is more appealing than that warmth. But warmth is deception, a short-term ploy for you to forget what really matters. An illusion. See, cold subsides, but victory is forever. Knowing that you pushed forward when most wouldn't is forever. Transforming potential into strength when your knees shook is forever. So burn the boat. For no other reason that there is no way forward so long as there remains a way back. Make life make you win. And where most would look around and see evidence of defeat, you'll find again and again in the same quote-unquote evidence the tools to build ladders to new beginnings and bridges to new worlds. There's a saying that I love, that most of life's successful people were too ignorant of the odds to know their accomplishments were considered at one point impossible. And I love it because it highlights that there was never a fallback option, a concern for the statistics. There was no worry or exhausted energy on what if. Rather, it was constant building and adjusting. finding ways over, through, and around the walls that inevitably stand before us. There was no way home, so they pushed forward into their greatness. And so can you, whatever shape, form, or color greatness looks like in your eyes, whatever mountaintop appeals to you, if you want it, if you're willing to decide before you go that you will one day stand amongst the clouds, peering out at that world you deemed wasn't against you, but for you, anything is possible. There's often a vast distinction between what we think is holding us back and what is actually holding us back. And that may even be putting it lightly. Most of the time, we're just plain misinformed. Most of the time, we're looking externally at irrelevant discrepancies between ourselves and someone else. We're looking at things that happened yesterday, possible outcomes that may happen tomorrow. We're creating entire stories, crafting narratives, building hostile worlds that simply don't exist. When what we need is simple: to give ourselves permission. To let ourselves walk out that front door and towards what we long for. And this came to light recently. I shared a simple 20-second message on TikTok where basically I highlighted John Green's quote about the best things in life occurring after we find the courage to depart or leave where we are, right? To build again. And as I was looking at the response, it was both beautiful and eye-opening. Hundreds and hundreds of comments from people saying that the message helped them feel empowered to do what they've been putting off. And some called it fate. Some called it what they needed to hear at the exact moment they needed to hear it. And as I'm going through, I keep thinking the same thing over and over and over. Every single one of these people, they already knew in their hearts what needed to come next. They knew what would make them feel alive. They knew where the compass was pointing. Yet their default led them to the same place we've all been, waiting for external permission, waiting for life to give us a reason to say, okay, the light is now green. You can go. The time is right. Now, don't get me wrong. It means the world that a simple message can shift one's perspective that way. I've been on the receiving end. I was stuck looking for some type of guidance. We all have, but I think we'd all agree that if that guidance helps us get back on track, then the real question should be, how do we live so that we can stay to the best of our ability on track? Find ourselves less prone to those occurrences, more confident in ourselves, in our dreams, in where we're going. And for me, it's been understanding that in my life, I am the one that creates, signs, and sends the permission slips. I say go. And when I remember that, I'm free to do what's best for me. I'm simultaneously the architect and the pieces, the wind and the sail. See, you don't need a reason to walk out of a relationship you're not happy in. You don't need a reason to leave a job that's not pushing you to be who you most want to become. You don't need a reason to change a habit or reinvent yourself or begin again. No, all you need is the courage to greenlight what your heart already knows it wants. We think that the external world has the answers for us, when in reality, we've had them the whole time. We just want something to point to say, see, I was right. But we don't need to be reactive. We can be proactive. You can be the one that lights the fire. When you follow your intuition, your heart, your sense of purpose, life conforms because it has to conform. When you become an immovable object, life around you moves. It makes way, and if it doesn't, then you go back to the drawing board, you adapt and adjust. And that's the beauty of life. That's how we build meaning, trusting ourselves to walk into that resistance. Because the friction and the headwind is never what's holding us back. Are they uncomfortable? Yeah. At times. Does it scare us? Sure. It's supposed to. But it's not what holds you back. Waiting for someone or something to come along and greenlight your journey through life is what holds you back. And it's funny, I think we again and again overlook the simplest of truths. The hardest part is starting. It's convincing yourself that 1, it's possible, and 2, you're worth it. Everything else you face from the second you walk out that front door can be conquered. In fact, we ourselves grow along the way so that we can rise up and meet the demands of life, but it's unquestionably doable. That thought as you look out the window, right? What if the worst case scenario happens? It can't. Because the worst case scenario is sitting in that seat your whole life, looking out the window and imagining a world where you found the courage to be more, to explore, to live life as it was meant to be lived. But let's say that what we fear does come to fruition. Then I ask, what are the odds it's reversible? Probably high. Let's say I want to start a podcast and I finally work up the courage and I get my mic and I start my show and no one listens. But I keep going and nothing sticks. And most importantly, I learned, look, I'm really not crazy about this idea. It wasn't what I thought it was. It's not me. Okay, perfect. Now you know. And sure, it took time to learn that lesson. But you have the rest of your life to continue the beautiful experiment, to search for what lights you up. But you found the courage to explore, to try, to begin, and you are now better because of it. That's your worst case scenario? Sounds a lot less scary to me than a life lived sitting there looking out the window. See, we can't let the fear of an unlikely worst case stop the possibility of that oh so coveted best case. Don't let the virtually 0% probability of losing everything overshadow the opportunity to gain everything. Let's never allow ourselves to get caught standing still waiting for the universe to give us the answer as though we're waiting for a letter in the mail. No, give yourself permission to see the upside, to make your own decisions, and most importantly, to live your life. life is delicate, defined as easily broken or damaged, fragile. There's nothing around you that's forever. There's no permanence in our world, and sometimes this is a difficult thing to grasp. Certainly, it's why we long for patterns of consistency where we can find them. We do everything we can to manufacture some semblance of predictability for as long as we can, doing our best to repress the idea that everything we know is as temporary as a setting sun. I had a family member rush to the ER a few days ago. And thank God she's completely fine. She's back home, she's doing her thing. But I can't stop thinking about the call, how it shook me to my core, how my walls of certainty and predictability were breached. It was this unsettling reminder that life as we know it isn't guaranteed, that things we love, they're not untouchable. I had to look my helplessness in the face for the first time in a while and realize, well, just how little of the world is mine to control. Which brings me back to a conversation I had when I was younger. I talk about my grandfather often in my work, primarily because of a few impactful conversations that we had. And it's interesting to me how relevant they continue to be. I remember a handful of times we talked from childhood, and it's like I piece them together retroactively. Things make sense as I get older and kind of figure out what it all means. One of my last conversations with him, we went to this little diner called Leo's along the Cape Cod Canal. And he said to me, there are things now that seem impossible. But as you grow and you get older, they make sense, right? Even the most challenging things become manageable. And I get mad at myself for not understanding the context at the time or putting two and two together. But basically, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor and he knew what that meant, right? And was basically giving me a heads up like, kiddo, this is going to be tough, but hang in there. And that was one of the first times I've dealt with loss of that magnitude, right? And when you're young, so many things seem stable. They seem certain. You don't yet get the fluidity of life. That stream is moving, and no matter what, it's going to continue to move. Sometimes that means it takes you places and presents realities that overtake the map that you created for the world, what you understood, what you hoped for. That little understanding of what life means. And I guess I wanted to pick up the baton from that conversation and pass it on to you with maybe a more comprehensive viewpoint. Because I think contained in those words is a message so powerful, so important, that we really can't afford to miss it. It's like, yes, life is unpredictable. And yes, life can hurt and humble us and knock down what we thought was certain. It can challenge what we believed and shake our foundations. It can make us feel small in a universe that stretches beyond comprehension. But at the very center of all of that, we are equipped with something that can't be broken. The only thing that can't be ripped away. The sun around which everything else revolves, your ability to endure, your strength to carry on, to take one step forward. Whether it feels like you're entrenched in the depths of hell or swinging from the stars in the sky, your resilience, your ability to not only handle life around you, but rise from the ashes of its turbulence and its misfortune, that will never leave you if you don't let it. Viktor Frankl has said, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. See, life might be more than we can control or comprehend, but amidst the might and power of its ocean, our determination is unsinkable. And believe me, there are times when you hear this and think, well, okay, that doesn't affect me. I'm good. I'm doing my thing, right? Just like I did sitting at that table over eggs and bacon that morning. And man, I hope that's the case, and I hope it stays that way. But life has a way of keeping us on our toes. It never lets us stray too far from the realization that to be human is, in some way or another, to suffer. It's inescapable, and that's not to scare you. It's to remind you that one, storms will come, and two, regardless of how heavy the rain falls or how loud the thunder roars, it will pass, and you are strong enough to hang on until it does. That as you grow and as you evolve, you become more and more capable of seeing the inevitable, not as the world's personal vendetta against you, but as your time to dig deep and find within yourself the strength and the courage that was there all along. And that's what that morning was. A message that, look, what's coming will hurt, but you can handle it. And not only that, every time life brings you to your knees, you get back up stronger. That doesn't mean it's easy, but the point is not that it's supposed to be easy. It's that you're capable of handling a world that is not easy. You're capable of navigating a reality that is not simple, a sea that is not smooth sailing. You're equipped to handle the complex. And sometimes that little reminder is the greatest gift one can receive. There's so much I can't control, but my God, there's so much I can. The reality you have mapped out, the day-to-day, the things you've come to know and rely on, as much as we wish they weren't, they are delicate, withering away with time, susceptible to the intricacies, the trials and tribulations of life. But your heart, your soul, your world within, that is untouchable. It's the divine, the sacred, its strength limitless, its breath endless. So remember, even in the darkest of times, you are the very light you long for. And as long as you believe that, there will always be a path. What if I told you that you already know what must be done? You just need to put yourself in position to do it. You need to unlearn the rules that crippled you, the ideas that confined you. We are in constant pursuit of the thing that will magically right all our wrongs, the answer that will give us something we've never had. No, everything you need, you have now. You just need to allow it to flourish. Declutter. Simplify. Remove all that unnecessary stuff and walk your path. Einstein once said, everyone is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And what's great about this is the idea that who we are is not found. It's acknowledged. It's accepted. And I think in our world, there are so many fish, as Einstein says, trying to climb trees, that it creates a sense of learned helplessness. We are judging ourselves using the wrong metrics. Equipped with the skills, the characteristics, and the abilities to win in our own arenas, but playing in someone else's. How loyal are you to your own instincts? Do you do what you know is right? Or what you feel obligated to pursue? When was the last time you listened to you? In Tim Grover's Relentless, he introduces a brilliant metaphor. He says, a lion doesn't have to be taught to be a lion. It just is. It hunts, runs, roams, explores, lives life the only way it knows how. Now, if you capture a lion, bring it to the zoo or put it in a cage, it will carry itself differently. It will lie down, move around lazily, sluggishly navigate its little space. To passersby, they'd never know what that lion really is. They'd never know what it looks like in its element. But despite all this, it is still, in fact, a lion. It maintains that killer instinct. His characteristics haven't disappeared. And if it were released from the cage, it would go right back to doing what lions do, being what lions are meant to be. It just has to ditch the cage. And the point is, perhaps, so do you. There's a little light in your soul that waits day and night to explode into something meaningful, where your nature meets your environment, where the I shouldn't do this, the odds are impossible, the I'm not good enough, I can't lose what I have now, where all that fades away, where it's left behind you. And you're finally free to reign over your own territory, your own life, your own empire. See, we constantly feel like our glasses are empty, like we're missing pieces, in need of something, just one more thing. That will be our answer. That's all we need. And I can say with confidence, it's not about what you need. It's about what you no longer need. It's about mitigating the noise so what matters can shine through. Removing those people in your life that drag you down or add no value. It's about getting rid of the things that make your world unnecessarily complex. Removing the need for immediate validation, success, and accolades. And instead embracing the little hinges in your life that, as W. Clement Stone said, will ultimately swing the biggest doors. We all have the lock, the key, and the map right there, amidst the trivialities of our day-to-day. And we walk right by them, look right at them, we pick them up and put them down. But have we learned to truly see them? Everything starts with that awareness. And my life did not change until I recognized that. Until I began asking myself questions I'd never asked before. Big picture questions. Obvious questions. But just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's always intuitive, right? What do I want out of life? What is important to me? What's something I love doing that I can dedicate myself to? That I can commit to being great at long term? That I'm so immersed in that when the inevitable down times arrive, the losses, when the doubt and insecurity creeps in, I can keep moving forward because I'm so in love with the process that I don't let the little things like that define me. As Jordan Peterson famously puts it, choose your sacrifice. A life of meaning isn't easy, but there's nothing more fulfilling. Because when you embark upon that journey, it allows for the evolution of the self. We can become something more. As Nietzsche says, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. We equip ourselves for anything the universe can throw at us. We position ourselves to evolve. Viktor Frankl says man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but rather to see meaning in his life. To align yourself with and pursue that which is your reason for living, that's how we transcend the day-to-day life we've come to know. When we breathe in possibility, dance with the infinite, and of course, something of this magnitude. It consists of ups and downs. It's not the easy road, but it's the one worth taking. Our metaphorical lion doesn't succeed every time he's prowling for food, but he doesn't roll over and die. He doesn't recede or quit being a lion. He gets up tomorrow and does it again. Because it's who the lion is. And while life doesn't unfold until you find that same thing for yourself. And people say, well, I don't know. That's the problem. I have no idea. That's not the problem. That's the essence of life. That's the beauty. You're here to explore and find that for yourself. But the power is knowing you're not looking for something or someone to save you. You're looking for an environment in which you can best be you. You're looking for the right terrain to share your gift with the world. If you have what you need, then you're not looking for the product. You're looking for the delivery mechanism, the vehicle to nurture and transport your value to a world that desperately needs it. You're looking to build yourself up and in the process, amaze yourself. Look, what you're capable of is beyond comprehension. It's limitless, almost unfathomable. But it is, as Ryan Holiday says, a confidence that must be earned. So start now. Earn it. Let yourself succeed. Your intuition knows what feels right and what doesn't. But the seed must first be planted. So make today about setting yourself up for success, turning off the idea that you're one piece away from completion, 1 minute away from starting, that you're almost ready. No, you are ready now. You have what you need now. You know what's necessary now. You just have to be your own ally. Put yourself in position to be yourself. Let your values shine. Double down on what matters to you. Look, it's not a game of acquisition. It's a game of courage. Do you have the courage to be who you are? To follow that potential, that possibility into the great unknown. Normality is a paved road. It's comfortable to walk, but no flowers grow. Vincent van Gogh. What is normality? Well, according to the dictionary, normal is the usual, average, or typical state or condition. Common. Normal is also a decision. There's a quote by Robin Sharma, and I've looked to this for years. It states, if you want what the 5% have, you need to be willing to do what only the 5% are willing to do. What they obtain is not, definitionally speaking, normal. It's uncommon. And what they do to arrive at that outcome is also uncommon. They play by a different set of rules, and in doing so end up with an entirely different outcome than most. To put it simply, we arrive at normal when our effort level is normal. You put in normal hours or give average effort at work, most likely your results, career progress, compensation will be normal. You pay moderate attention to your fitness, your health, well, your level of physical fitness will be normal. You dedicate typical levels of effort to your relationships will be normal. Not terrible, but not remarkable. Right? And I'm sure you get the idea here, the pattern. Generally, over time, what we get starts to reflect what we gave. And here's where the self-assessment comes in, the awareness. You have to ask yourself, in pursuit of something greater, whether your actions are aligning with your goals and objectives. There's nothing so futile as telling yourself you're going to achieve miraculous, larger-than-life outcomes, and then putting in average, typical, normal effort. If normal goes in, normal comes out. And as I was thinking about this recently, as it pertains to my life, I had a little epiphany, right? So fitness is a big area of focus for me. I run or do some type of strength training 6 days a week. As far as I can tell, that level of effort is beyond normal, right? I go above and beyond in that area of my life. But even though I'm aligned on my mission to be the 5% there, I realized there was a gap. I realized my diet was very normal, completely unextraordinary. It's just easy to convince yourself to eat whatever you want after a really long run, right? Why not pizza? After all, it's the normal thing to do. But I had to remind myself that what I wanted in that area of my life, holistically, is not normal. Therefore, the inputs cannot be normal. It was time to start standing up to those things that are very easy to say yes to rationalize. And that's the idea here. I pick my 5% categories where I truly want to excel and make sure there's nothing normal about their development. You want top tier results? You have to give top tier effort. Make the sacrifices, map out the path. I've come to see this differently over the years. It's not an indictment against you as a person for choosing normal, but know that it is indicative of a choice. And the output eventually comes to align with the input. All the actions or lack thereof stack up to resemble something. It's up to you to decide what that is. And so the next question, perhaps somewhat of an obvious one, is when it comes to the things that matter most to you, why stay confined to normal? It's the above and beyond, the peak experiences, the times we overcame, fought and won, took the risk and came out on top. That's when we are at our best. That's when we get the most from life. So is normal the end of the world? No. It's just that abnormal is the beginning of one. I was recently reading a book called The Boys in the Boat, about 9 American rowers from Washington that won gold in the 1936 Olympics. And there's this incredible exchange at one point in the book between the main character, Joe, who's part of that historic boat, and a man named George Pocock, who was not only a brilliant rowing mind that helped the team out, but he also had his own business crafting and making the boats, or rowing shells, as they were called, and he would make them and send them to schools all over the country. And so Joe's deal is that he's this natural talent, right? Strong kid, tough as nails, but just seems to lose his composure from time to time. Right? When he's in the boat, there are these moments of jaw-dropping excellence, unprecedented speed across the water, and then there are moments when he loses his focus, and the boat sort of follows suit, right? They're inconsistent. And so George Pocock, being the rowing expert that he is, made a commitment to see if he could help Joe figure that out, right? The mental game. So he calls Joe into his shop and he starts showing him how he puts together these highly coveted boats, showing him the tools and the pieces and how it's nothing short of an art. He has sort of this divine respect for his craft. And at one point he pulls out a cedar plank that he'll be using to make one of the boats, and he points to the growth rings in the wood, mentioning that they tell the story of the tree's 2,000-year life. And so here's a quick quote from the exchange. He says, "Their thickness and thinness spoke of hard years of bitter struggle, intermittent with rich years of sudden growth. The different colors spoke of various soils and minerals that the tree's roots had encountered, some harsh and stunting, some rich and nourishing. Flaws and irregularities told how the tree endured fires and lightning strikes, windstorms and infestations, and yet continued to grow. Almost as if there was something sacred about it. The wood taught us about survival, about overcoming difficulty, about prevailing over adversity, but it also taught us something about the underlying reason for surviving in the first place. Something about infinite beauty, underlying grace, about things larger and greater than ourselves, about the reasons we are all here." I paused after reading that and thought for a minute or two, what is it about those rowers crossing the finish line after giving everything they have that touches us so deeply? What is it about a cedar tree standing the test of time, those 2,000 years of adversity, only to triumphantly pierce the sky when all is said and done? It moves us because it tells us what we already know, yet forget. In our hearts believe, but often fail to see. That we are greater than the sum of our parts. Ernest Becker, when he was touching on the aspect of the human predicament, he famously noted that we are simultaneously worms and gods, earthly and divine. And I think it's in those moments, the crossing of finish lines, the times we did more than we ever thought possible, or looked back and smiled about all we overcame. It's in these times we're able to transcend the mundane, the everyday. We're able to remind ourselves that sure, some aspects of us are merely human, but no aspects are ordinary. The greatest power one can witness is that of the human spirit, bending but never breaking, making light of the odds and an example of the predictable. So know that whether now is difficult or not, it's part of your journey, a defining chapter in the incredible story of your life. And if you find yourself up, cherish that. It's more precious than gold. If you find yourself down, remember that you'll look back on this growth ring of your life and be grateful that it gave you that which smooth sailing never could. Because at the end of the day, all you have is what's in front of you, the next move, the next step, and the faith that all these little pieces will someday mean something, that standing the test of time will speak for itself. At your finish line, whatever that may be, it will. You'll look back and see that without your knowing or awareness, they propelled you into the current moment. They gave life to something beyond the realm of worms and dirt, beyond the realm of humans operating in their day-to-day world. No, they allowed you, for a moment in time, to touch the infinite, if only to prove to yourself that you could. For a handful of years, I'd made this annual trip to the desert in Utah. And I'd take some time to be solo to clear my head, leave my phone in the cabin, which didn't have service anyway. I'd grab a backpack with some food, my camera, and I'd just go exploring. From the time the sun came up to the time it went down, I'd follow trails through the canyons, climb over rocks, wedge myself between boulders, traverse open fields. I would get lost in something so far outside the realm of my standard day-to-day that life, well, it didn't feel like life. It felt surreal. And one day I was out there, and I guess I got kind of carried away making a running video. I looked down at the map as the sun was setting and realized I was miles from the car. In the desert. Not a good place to be. And this panic set over me, right? It was a mix of fear and annoyance with myself for letting something so stupid happen. This is precisely the vulnerability that the routine of our day-to-day lives seeks to mitigate. This is Society 101. We pay taxes and stop at red lights in exchange for the certainty that we won't die in the middle of a random desert. But hey, look, life comes at you quickly. Suddenly, that safety net wasn't there to protect me. Now what? I started running in what I believed to be the general direction I came from. Backpack full of camera gear and empty water bottles bouncing up and down with each step. My heart was pounding so fast that it felt like a movie. It didn't feel real, and as the sun lowered itself behind the mountains, I wasn't quite sure what it would leave for me. Look, we know obstacles hurt, but the unknown really hurts. In the sky, it turned this beautiful blue, purple, otherworldly color. I guess it was the landscape saying goodbye before it faded to black. And I knew it would be black, like can't see the hand in front of your face black. And as I continued on, the night sure validated my concerns. I had to stop running. I had to walk because I could no longer see the bushes and rocks I was stepping over. Eventually I paused for a second, reeled myself in, put my hands on my hips, sighed, looked up. Noticed something I never really had before. The sky. Well, that makes zero sense, one might think, considering I'm a human being and I live on Earth where there's very clearly a sky, but no, not like that. Not like Utah desert sky. A trillion tiny candles that felt so real that I felt for the first time nothing separated them from me. I was a part of it. I was immersed in a blanket of stars. If I could live for 20-something years and never see that, imagine the smaller miracles I've been blindly dancing around. Imagine the beauty that isn't hanging directly over my head. It was out there, and I vowed from now on I'd find it just like this path home, but hey, let's start there. And perhaps in the moment was that I felt part of something bigger than my mini crisis. Or maybe it was because common sense had finally set in. But I got this feeling of calm. By momentarily losing myself in the stars, I came back down to Earth. I understood everything would be okay, that worst case, I'd just pace back and forth until the sun came up. I mean, sure, it wasn't 100% everything would be fine, but is it ever? I proceeded to walk forward, eyes fixated on the ground in front of me, using the screen on my camera as a guiding light. Perhaps this wasn't the right path, but at this point it was the one I had committed to. Some time went by, and I saw in the distance what I was pretty sure was either a cell phone or a flashlight, which I know, what a concept. I followed it, more sure of myself with each step forward, eventually passing a sign indicating that the trailhead was 1/4 mile in the same direction. I paused again and smiled to myself. Ultimately, I found the parking lot, hopped in the car, just as the odds suggested I would, and I departed for my mini adventure. As I was driving back, windows down, headlights cutting through the darkness, the only sound, the tires making their way over the gravel below, I sat there thinking and realized I actually felt sad. Felt like I wasn't ready to depart that little journey. That I needed that uncertainty in my life. I needed to conquer something new. I thought about the abrupt panic, the wolves, rattlesnakes, and scorpions that danced around in my head. And how such a small, almost laughable step outside of my comfort zone felt like a tremendous leap. I guess our most important moments come when we least expect them. And while I learned a lot about myself that night, I learned that there will be times we find ourselves wandering through the darkness of life, maybe ill-prepared, angry at ourselves for not foreseeing that things would unfold the way they did. But these obstacles are most likely solvable and small in the grand scheme of things, and that's not even the most important part. They are the gateway into our souls, into the ecstasy and the adventure that live outside the confines of parameters and checklists and routines. They remind us to look up and see what really matters, to peel back the manufactured must-haves we erroneously bow down to. I had to live that moment to understand what it meant, to see that the things we most fear are the things we most need. That real dreaming, it happens when we're awake, and that anytime you feel abandoned or lost or alone, look up at that blanket of stars. Realize they're not against you, but a part of you. A beacon of hope along the way. And know they can't promise you answers or guaranteed outcomes. But I can promise you, you wouldn't want that anyway. I saw an interview by one of my favorite authors today, Steven Pressfield, where he highlighted what I believe to be a critical and often overlooked point. He says a lot of people think life is short, but life is actually long. And he goes on to explain that he didn't even get his first book published until well into his adult life, making the point that people at 24, 34, 54, 64, they think they've won or lost, when they've got a lot of game left to play. And this message, it does a few things. I think first and most obviously, it creates a kind of calm. Like, okay, I can take some of the pressure off myself. Life isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. I'm not doing so bad. Sometimes we lose that perspective. We forget that the best things in life evolve over time. Often not an avalanche, but the chipping away of a stone until the statue reveals itself. As frustrating as it may be, clarity is often an evolution. And the second thing is, it plays a role in defining what success means. If games are won in the second half, as they frequently are, then we learn not to define ourselves by the outcome of the first quarter. But more importantly, to put ourselves in position to win in the fourth. The score at halftime is not defining. It's a treasure trove of lessons and information and data that can be tapped into to get the result that we ultimately want. And I often think of running in South Florida where, I joke that I don't sit at the beach, but if you run during the day, you kind of get the best of both worlds. A little bit of sunshine, you get your workout in, but the obvious disadvantage, especially in the summer, is that the heat is taxing on the body. It's more challenging to run under that sun. And what I find is that when I push my pace right out of the gate, right from the start, push my physical boundaries, the second half of the run is a nightmare. Always. I'm dragging. Speed isn't even a factor. I'm pleading with myself to simply not stop because I haven't positioned myself well. But on the other hand, when I'm disciplined, and when from the start I ease into something comfortable and progressively increase my speed, my body somehow responds exponentially better. I get the most out of myself that way. That's why I've said in the past, I'm proudest of my results when the last few miles are the fastest miles. It means I had the discipline and the foresight to make that happen. And ultimately, the big picture is affected in a positive way. And I know the same can be said for other aspects of life. I know the same can be said for the moments of temptation, when my ego pleads with me to do what someone else is doing, or things aren't evolving as quickly as I want, so my pride says, just walk away from it all. Why? Because the current moment doesn't look how I wanted it to. So the mind says panic. It says change things. It says you're losing or not good enough. It says you better pick up the pace right now because you're losing this current moment. But no, the question isn't, is right now the goal? The question is right now moving me forward consistently? So that when the time comes to sprint, so that when I'm ready to go faster than I've ever gone, be more than I've ever been, I've positioned myself to do just that. When things were challenging, I kept moving forward. When the world around me seemed to be moving at a faster pace, I ran my own race. I stayed consistent. I remembered what mattered to me. That's the question. And by the way, this doesn't mean ignoring today's results. It means asking yourself whether today's results are meaningful in the big picture. Right? Using Stephen Pressfield's example, if you don't get published or your work is rejected again and again and again, you have not lost. It's the beginning. It's the first quarter. But what info can you gain from this? What tweaks can you make to your work so that it's in some way more captivating? How can you sell it a little better? What can you do to connect with people who will believe in you and help push you forward? Remember, you only lose when you decide to stop. Why? Because as long as you're willing to adjust and keep going, there are no stopping points. People don't realize limitations are self-imposed. Losing or quitting just means you stood up and said, I'm going to stop learning and evolving with regard to this pursuit. I no longer want to adapt and move on. No outside circumstances can impose that upon you. It's truly an internal decision. I remember Jim Rohn saying, success is easy. Doing the thing that's best for you in the long run is easy. Doing the right things every day is easy. And people would say, well, that doesn't make sense. Why isn't everyone successful? Well, because doing the wrong thing is easy too. It's easy to think right now is the end-all be-all. To forget the big picture, that life is a journey, that you are equipped with everything you need. And when you don't see success to your left or right, when your ideal world hasn't been created, to panic, to seek drastic change, instead of remembering one step in front of the other gets you to your finish line. Instead of remembering the second half is where you make your move, is where you make your push. Not every swing is a home run. Not every swing needs to be a home run. It's about on-base percentage. It's about setting yourself up for success. Step by step, day by day, allowing yourself to evolve. Because if you hang in there long enough, if you say yes and trust yourself long enough, you will get your Super Bowl. You will get your midday run when the sun is at its fullest, you're exhausted, you're tired, and you don't want to keep going. But because you invested in the big picture, because you played the long game, you'll be one of the few who understands, who has created the weapon, the answer, the key that will open the door very few people get to open and walk through. The best things in life take time, and time requires patience. Patience can be painful. It can cause suffering, chaos. But from that chaos comes order. From that suffering comes meaning. Everything we needed and wanted is on the other side of that evolution. See that your short-term losses are not crippling you. They are creating you. In the midst of chaos, there's also opportunity. That's a quote from Sun Tzu, referencing the idea that when we are backed into a corner of some sort, or when we are low, when we're vulnerable, when we're at our worst, that's when the door opens to transform, right? And we talk about this all the time, right? I can give you an infinite amount of videos on this channel talking about moving into fear, that state of the unknown, breaking down what we know. And I think a lot of people hear that, but perhaps don't understand why. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because when I understood why, like so many things, my perspective changed, and this was a big one. It was big with regard to how I saw my life, my role in the trials and tribulations of the world. Why do one thing that scares you every day? Why do the difficult thing? And the best explanation I've ever heard, I was listening to one of Jordan Peterson's online lectures. He's talking about order and chaos, right? Our natural inclination, our understanding is that chaos equals bad, right? When we think chaos, we think moving pieces, we think, disaster, something we need to move away from. And that in itself is the problem. That instinct, or that rash, understanding. In reality, chaos is just as important as order. They are night and day. You can't have one without the other, and you need both. Too much order is when we are stuck in a status quo, when there is a lack of growth, when things are very structured, very simple, and they just feel the same, right? We become accustomed to a certain truth. That is order. Chaos is, as I've said in the past, taking something, smashing it against a wall, picking up those pieces and building something new. And upon building, you've changed whatever that was just a little bit. You've changed your understanding a little bit of yourself, of that object, and of the world, because life is a perpetual staircase. It is being on a step, stepping out into some crazy unknown where you no longer understand what is going on, leveling up, growing, figuring it out, picking those pieces up, and then moving on to the next step. It is building and breaking, and building and breaking, and building and breaking. So why step out into the unknown? The unknown is the only way to break the status quo. The unknown is the door into a next level, a new you, a new reality. When you look at it, human beings want to bucket things into good or bad, right? And when the reality is, most of the time, the truth and the value the reality is in the gray area, right? So when we think about the good times, we think this is what we want. This is ideal. Things are fluid. They're simple. But that is antithetical to change, right? Change comes from chaos. Just like when I thought things were going wrong, my first thought was always, oh my God, the world's ending. This is not good. We need to find a way to completely mitigate this, to change the situation. Now, when the wheels fall off that metaphorical wagon, what I think is, well, here is the opportunity. Here's the opportunity to build that new step, to create a new order, so that I can live my life differently. See, we don't level up unless the situation around us requires that we do so. Sometimes life doesn't give us a choice, right? Sometimes the world backs us into a corner. But there are a lot of situations where we need to manufacture that chaos. We need to drive that change, climb up that ladder. It's funny to think about, some of those people that we emulate, that we look up to. And, people don't talk about the risks that were taken and how many times they picked up their life, they picked up their status quo and smashed it with a hammer so that they could rebuild it and have something a little bit more sturdy, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. That's how wisdom is created. When I look at that cycle now, and I see it as the answer. When I haven't had one of those calls or Zoom meetings or haven't created something, haven't, fill in the blank, that gives me that feeling in my stomach of at least some semblance of anxiety, I'm not growing. Right? The things that gave me anxiety 5 years ago, most of them are commonplace today, right? That chaos is very much order now. So what's going to be the new thing, right? That was the ceiling, now it's the floor. Well, what's the new ceiling? And that's on us to create. That onus is on us to build, right? Constructing a different world means reassembling the pieces. And so I want that message to be clear. I want everyone to understand that when someone says, what you want is on the other side of fear, or keep going, don't give up. Well, why? The reason is because that chaos is your ticket to the next level, the next staircase. That anxiety and sometimes that suffering is a portal to transformation. And it's hard in the moment to understand that. I'd never sit here and say it's easy. But me, and one of the things that changed my life is the understanding that the best things are not easy. The value is in what's difficult. The meaning is in that unknown. I think life is a beautiful thing because the pieces we need are everywhere around us. And it's a really cool realization. It's like everything you need exists. It's out there. It's waiting for you to pick it up. It's waiting, it'll correspond with the picture you want to paint, the road you want to take. But that requires stepping off the stage you're on and heading towards another. So, I want to leave you with that understanding that you are climbing a staircase to something greater, to an evolved self. You're taking your potential and you're making something with it. But that means you won't always be comfortable. And when you look back, you'll be grateful. Right? You'll be grateful for those those trials and tribulations. You'll be grateful for that chaos because it will be what made you. Came across a quote recently that said the road to success is dotted with many tempting parking spaces. And I thought this demonstrated or captured a realization that's pretty hard to articulate. And that is just how tempting it is to rationalize stopping or discontinuing your journey when life gets tough. How much sense it always makes to want to call it quits when things get uncomfortable. It's like, it's not just that doing something valuable is hard. It's that it's hard, and every 3 feet there's an invitation to not have to do it anymore. There's an endless supply of exit signs and escape routes. Therefore, accomplishing a goal is simultaneously saying yes to the challenging things while also saying no to the comfortable things. It's fighting off 2 demons at once. The good news, though, is that you were made to do just that. You just have to change the way you internalize the process. You have to change what you see along the way. I talk a lot about perfection as the enemy. And that's something I wholeheartedly believe to be true, but I generally talk about it in the context of perfection keeping us from starting, right? I try and unveil perfection as this defense mechanism that it truly is. Oh, things aren't perfect, I'll wait. Things aren't exactly where I want them to be, then I won't go. Emphasizing that it's in going that perfection is crafted. Like a statue being chiseled from stone. You fall, you get back up, and find that in doing so, you end up with a little more clarity than you had when you started. You let the trials and tribulations of the journey refine the product. And so that's the beginning, right? That's finding the courage to start, removing the idea of perfect when really it's just our fears masked. But what about when you've already started? What about when you're underway, when you're in the midst of those trials and tribulations? Because we all know this. When you're in pain, your body wants one thing: to remove yourself from the pain. When things are uncomfortable, your default is to seek out those aforementioned parking spaces. Reprieve from the grasp of the unknown. Things aren't perfect, then I'm done here. Things feel awkward or uncomfortable or unclear, then why bother? What I want to do right now is make the argument that it's most important to continue forward when we're in these moments. It's most critical to move forward when the road is unclear and those tempting parking spaces start revealing themselves. Things are not perfect, maybe even far from perfect. And this is right about the time when we forget why we started. I've run into this in my past, right? Particularly with injuries. There was a period in my not too distant past when my ankle and shoulder were simultaneously messed up, right? So couldn't run, couldn't really do any upper body work. My physical activity really took a dive, right? So I'm a little discouraged. And sure enough, I found the eat whatever you want parking space. It's like, who cares? You're not working out. What's the point? Just focus on the business. Put a pause on all that stuff. And then eating whatever I wanted became, well, what's the point of getting up at 5 when I could just get up at 7? I sleep 2 hours longer is how I rationalize it. It's not like I'm going to be running. And then there goes some very important alone time, thinking time, and you can see how easily the wheels sort of fall off the wagon. Not because you're a bad person or don't want the result, but because the second things stop being perfect or working the way I wanted them to, I found a parking space. There will be few stretches of time in life when everything's perfect. Things going exactly how you want them to, it will simply be the exception, not the rule. And then the question becomes, can you put your head down and continue forward, knowing that life will call for adaptation and adjustment? But that those tempting exit signs are not for you. They are weakness. They are for those who forget their strength and their courage. I mentioned a little while ago that growth is fighting two demons. Saying yes to the mountain ahead and no to the off-ramps. But when you step back and look at things different, you change the dynamic. You put the odds in your favor. When the off-ramps become reminders of your strength as you pass them one by one, indicators of your commitment to move forward. And when the mountain ahead becomes merely the way, not some giant sacrifice or monster, but merely a path, things simplify in a way that empowers you on your mission. There is no perfect or imperfect. There is adjusting when necessary and taking the next little step along the way. And using the previous example, it's like, I'm injured, okay? This will definitely be a time for adjustment. Maybe it's yoga, stretching, practicing being more patient, maybe greater emphasis on meditation, mental strength, whatever it is, but we don't stop. We continue stepping forward. The next step will look a little different, but that's all. If perfect is a standard one's seeking to maintain, they'll always be pulling over. They'll always be backing off, because very rarely do we have stretches of perfection. Life is an adjustment game, not a perfection game. Life asks, what can you do when your hands are tied behind your back? What can you do when you're tired? What can you do when you've just endured loss, when your pride hurts, your plans fail? And trust me, that's when you see all those off-ramps. That's when something in the back of your mind says, hey, all this goes away if you just throw in the towel. Just go seek perfection somewhere else. You'll find it there. But you can chase that rabbit down a million paths. There is no perfection waiting for you, and there is no flawless pursuit. Life comes down to what will you do now? Where you are with what you have, can you find a way to win when it hurts? Look, we all need to understand that life is innately difficult. And success calls for a simplification that is adapting and stepping forward. That's all. Things are hard, you step. Things don't go as you planned, you adapt and you step. But you are always moving towards that North Star, whatever it is for you. It's deeming those parking spaces insignificant with regard to your life and your journey. Quitting is not brought about by the external world. No, failure is a decision. Failure is saying, you know what, this costs more effort than I'm willing to pay. Those parking spaces have become more tempting than the top of this mountain. Failure is a choice. And so, for one to succeed, they must simply stay in motion. Choose adaptation over a self-imposed end. Yeah, enjoy those moments of perfection, the times the stars do align. but see them as the exception, not the rule. We are not defined when things are great. We are defined by our ability to pick up the pieces and keep moving forward when they're not. Our lives are shaped by the exits we don't take, the parking spaces we don't even notice as we ascend the mountain that is life. Because anything other than the road ahead was never an option. You didn't succeed because things were perfect. You succeeded because you found a way to win when they weren't. Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. There's a distinct difference between today and tomorrow, the real and the so-called imagined. One has already been created, and the other is in desperate need of a creator. And see, until we learn that we can be proactive in this regard, imagination doesn't mean much. It's just a car without wheels, plane without wings. It's more of an escape than a bridge to something better. But once we realize how much control we have over tomorrow, we become, in our own right, creators. Not just waiting to read and react to stories already written and handed down to us, but possessing this incredible ability to pick up a pen and craft something new. Become agents of change. I recently came across an interesting article. Had some info that made me think. Basically, it said if you take some domesticated animals like pigs or chickens and you place them back into the wild, some of their previously repressed biological tendencies come right back into play. So, for example, chickens change their breeding habits, how they take care of their eggs. Pigs regrow their hair and that mane going down their back. And these old, repressed, kind of hidden away genes are reselected for again over time. And the animals begin to reacclimate, as though that potential was never lost. It just needed to immerse itself in the right environment. And it's like, well, if we view ourselves in that same light, now we might ask, what if we positioned ourselves to gravitate towards an environment that was best for us? What if I imagined a world, not exactly like today, but one better conducive to me being me? A world where I'm set up to thrive. Where sure, there will be bumps and bruises and losses and lessons along the way, but where I'm immersed in a journey towards a destination that excites me, that lights me up. Can I find the courage to not only imagine that finish line, but also act accordingly, move towards it? You know, I always say the hardest thing to do is to recreate outcomes that look different from the current moment. Because, well, the current moment is all we know. It's all anybody knows. And by the way, it's all anybody wants to know, right? Until something new is placed right in front of them at their feet, until proof exists. Changing your life, or the lives of those around you, means you have to literally look at the road before you and see outcomes that are not there. Then you have to believe in those outcomes. You have to drive towards those outcomes, have conviction in your ability to overcome obstacles on your way to those outcomes. Truth be told, chasing your imagination is simultaneously one of the greatest burdens one can endure, as well as a key to that which makes life worth living. There's something about being human that pushes us towards hope, towards the possibility of a tomorrow better than today. And that's not to say don't be grateful. It's not saying don't see the beauty around you or appreciate the world you live in. But I believe we're here to take that torch from yesterday and move it one step forward. Maybe it's in our own lives, a small step forward in our careers, a relationship, or our health. Maybe it's improving the lives of those around us, family, friends. Maybe it's something larger, societal. Whatever it is, I'm convinced that true meaning in life is finding the courage to push one foot further down the path of possibility, to add one step to that ascending staircase, knowing that it will allow us to someday look back on today and be proud of what we faced and overcame. And as I wake up and I look around, I think to myself, that has to mean cherishing the ideas in our heads. It has to mean we understand the power of our instincts, of our beliefs, of hope. It means understanding that it justifies all the hardship that comes with taking those ideas and giving them life. Because everything around us was built with the courage to take little nothings and make them something. And when we're lost or feel alone or for one reason or another forget that, we need to remember that right now is not forever. It can't be. It's a stepping stone to whatever you decide tomorrow is. And that goal isn't perfection. You don't need all the answers. You need the courage to take one little step in a new direction, to write just one sentence on a brand new page. Because that imagination is not fiction. It's not the delta between the possible or impossible. It's not there to entertain. It's there because it's your map. And you may look at that map and think to yourself, you're lost. That it's unclear, that the directions, well, they're incomplete at best. But what I can promise you is the pursuit of this world you've imagined, it will bring you greater satisfaction than anything else could. It will remind you why you're here and show you that life isn't supposed to be easy while helping you appreciate it for being that way. See, your imagination is your path to that ideal state where you can thrive. Be you, push your boundaries and spread your wings. Don't ever let the current state of today convince you that your hopes and your dreams for tomorrow are too big, that you've missed the mark or stepped out of line. In a world of reaction, be one of the few who looks in the mirror and decides to live life proactively, take initiative. Be one of the few who stands wholeheartedly behind that world they've imagined. We sat around in a circle on a beautiful fall morning to build dream catchers. Something, to be honest, I never saw myself doing in a million lifetimes. The feathers and strings and beads and glue stretched out on a blanket in the middle of the circle. As we built, we took what we needed piece by piece. And it's safe to say, mine was far and away the least, let's say, aesthetically pleasing of the group. Black and bright yellow string wrapped around the top, above which an assortment of random beads sort of dangled carelessly below. It wasn't the most beautiful dream catcher ever made, but it was mine. After a quick Google search, I learned that some Native Americans believe that the air at night is filled with dreams, both good and bad, and that the purpose of the dream catcher is to protect from the bad ones, the nightmares and the evil spirits. Interesting, I thought, putting it away, expecting that to be that and life to move on. But a few days later on the flight home, I got up mid-flight to grab a charger out of my carry-on overhead. And in the same side pouch was, you guessed it, that little black and yellow dream catcher. One of the dangled strings had snapped. My sloppy craftsmanship already was causing the top to loosen up. But something compelled me to grab it, along with my charger, and I sat back down. I had 8.5 hours to kill, put my chair back, and closed my eyes. The previous week had been an important one. A complete break from, my typical day-to-day routine. And probably more important, some forced introspection. I like to think of the trip as briefly leaving the heart of a city. Which, when you're in a city, you obviously know you're there, but you can't really grasp the magnitude and scope of the place. Not until you leave it and see it from the outside. The gorgeous skyline with the lights and buildings that extend into the clouds. A picture you only get from a distance. That skyline from 5 miles away just doesn't feel like it could be the same place you live in. You navigate every day street by street with car horns and cafes and people talking, coming and going. It just kind of flips life upside down for you. Presents new perspectives and questions, and I felt like that's what I'd done. Stepped outside that metaphorical city. And I'd picked up a solid handful of new questions. There were plenty of firsts for me. Met some incredible people, tried new things, went new places, explored new foods. All made me realize that, my worldview had slowly over time, as tends to happen when unchecked, collapsed in on itself. That there was so much more, so much hope and opportunity, so much left. To the extent that the flight back didn't feel like the end of a trip. It felt like the beginning of something new. Like I wasn't leaving these things. I was taking them with me. But here's the deal. Beginnings only matter if you make them matter. Things only change when you make them change. When I was in junior high, one of my teachers would sometimes joke that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Half serious, but the point is important. It's not what we intend to do. It's what we breathe life into. It's what we allow to take shape. Let's say that little dream catcher in my hand was a magical entity that sucked out of the sky all the bad dreams and nightmares and left me with only the good stuff. Let's say it was the gateway to all that was powerful, meaningful, and important. Because removing what I don't want is critical. But what I'm then left with is mere opportunity, not guarantee. Dreams are only potential, and life is only what we make it. So growth must be a team effort between me and this little black and yellow defender of worlds, watchman of the night. A duo. And we agreed. It reminds me of what truly matters, and I show it that I'm not afraid to make something of what remains. Of those ideals granted passage to the space behind my eyes. I have to live up to my end of the bargain. And sure, it will be messy at times, shaky, sloppy, ungraceful. But that isn't a problem. It's par for the course. Plus, my lack of elegance will get no sympathy from my unraveling black and yellow ball of string and disordered beads. Right? The goal is not perfection. It's organized chaos. It's a commitment to the unknown, to taking the pieces and building something with them, even when we don't understand what it will become. And as the pilot's voice interrupted my sleep through the intercom, letting us know to prepare for landing, I realized the magic of where I'd just been and how it would evolve into the road ahead. That when we know in our hearts life is pointing us a certain direction, when we've separated the good dreams from the bad, we are halfway there. Now we must have the courage to realize what's possible. To be strong enough to stand up when we have something to say. To embrace what calls to us, to explore where our paths may lead. To get up and dance when the music plays. To stop holding back tears when they must fall, to smile when our hearts intend, to leave the old stories and narratives behind, and to step beyond our egos and towards our authenticity. This is how we make sure that the dream catcher's work is not in vain. It's how we make the most of this gift we've been provided. And so we sat in a circle on a beautiful fall morning to build dream catchers. Maybe not to collect the bad dreams, but to remind ourselves that it was okay, no, necessary, no, everything, to let ourselves make the good dreams reality. There's a quote from George Eliot that states, "It's never too late to be what you might have been." And see, that ability to separate the stories of yesterday from the stories of right now will always be what determine your tomorrow. I'm still searching for the best way to really articulate this message, to emphasize just how precious this moment right now could be. If only we decided to make it so. If only we recognized the power in choosing to begin again. Now, I understand the power of habits, how they define us, and how, practically speaking, change isn't as easy as saying you're going to be something and then just becoming that thing. No, you have to build habits, your actions. They become your life, and there are plenty of resources on habit building. Like James Clear being one of my favorites and someone I point to often. One of his best quotes, he says, "The task of building a good habit is like cultivating a delicate flower, one day at a time." Right? Meaning little actions over time create big results. But before any of that, before any steps, before any habits, before any action, we have to know that once a page is turned, it's gone. It becomes data to guide your next decision, and that's all. It's understanding that yesterday is not you. Only a resource for you to look back on as you reflect on what worked and what didn't, what you loved and what you didn't love, where you went and why it mattered. But you're not yesterday's losses or mistakes or tragedies. Just like today's weather is ultimately independent from yesterday's. Sure, they may follow the same patterns, same rules, same guidelines. And that's great. That's how we get the data that allows us to look back and calculate what's best for us. But ultimately, today is a new day. A day with the potential, the capability of becoming something extraordinarily beautiful. And we may think, okay, right, I get it. Sure, I can become something new. All right, let's go. But the question is, do you really believe it? Do you really understand how malleable you are? How you can bend and fold and shape yourself into something new? Because the second you get that quick blast of motivation, right, that tiny bit of courage, and dip your toe in the water, what happens? Life says, not so fast. Your mind presses play on a giant projector, showing the film of who you used to be, right? Not who you want to be. Social media displays a seemingly perfect collage of everyone around you pretending to live problem-free lives and prompting you to think, oh, this must mean I'm doing something wrong. Right? TV, news, media, politicians tell you that life is too hard. You're too oppressed to find your way out of this. Of course, not without their help. So why try, one might think? Friends may disappear, or worse, criticize the fact that you've changed, as if that wasn't the point of life in its entirety. And my message is this. Yes, change comes from habits. And yes, habits are small, daily decisions, but also creating that mental space to welcome in those new habits. To understand you're worthy of more, to understand right now is a beginning. That is both the greatest challenge and greatest accomplishment. Giving yourself permission amidst an endless array of adversaries. That's what makes or breaks you. Not how close you keep your running shoes to the door so that you see them and it triggers those AM workout sessions. No, that stuff's important, but does it matter if you don't see yourself as someone who's going to use those shoes as a tool to change into something new? To put them on when you don't want to, when you feel tired, when you're busy? Who are you going to choose to be? And can you hold on to that idea? See, I obviously enjoy motivation, right? I consume a video or an audio almost every morning. I feel like it gets me in the right headspace, and then I get on with my work, right? And for the most part, it does a great job of communicating to us what we need for that moment. It's like, believe in yourself. Work hard. Don't you dare give up. Amen. But where it sometimes drops the ball, in my opinion, is the why. Why believe in myself? Why work hard? Why not give up? And the answer is because we are these incredibly gifted beings with the ability to change and adapt and grow, but are confronted with a world that wants to tell you no. Change is immediately met with resistance, as if it prefers life at rest. It begs for stagnation. And you even thinking that you can rearrange the order of things shakes life at its foundation. And when we feel that, there's a default uncertainty, a mini panic. How can something be right when it just feels like every move forward is a right hook to the face? Like we're constantly pushing into the headwind. I'll never forget, it was almost 2 years into my journey as a speechwriter, a YouTuber, a content creator, right? 2 years since I left my job. And I felt guilty taking an afternoon jog. It felt like a luxury I wasn't entitled to. Something that minimal. It took time for me to stop thinking about that and enjoy it. That's how crazy it was. Something so tiny and insignificant. Now imagine the weight of the big things. With change, the hard thing is the right thing. That's a tough idea to put our hands around, to hold, to embrace. What we least want to do is so often what we need. But as Campbell says, the cave we fear holds the treasure we seek. As Peterson says, the dragon protects the gold. Jim Rohn, the winters of life give way to the springs and the summers. Nietzsche said there's no beautiful surface without a terrible depth. To become who we might be hurts. And I'm not sure why it has to be this way. Perhaps a test to weed out those who don't really want it. Or maybe it's what we learn when we leave the pieces of ourselves we no longer want behind. Or maybe it's because without that fight, without that suffering, evolution just wouldn't mean as much. But the climb, it creates the view. Regardless the reason, I hope the point comes through and it comes through loud and clear, and not just now as your alarm clock goes off and you're looking for that extra push to get up, but tomorrow, in the morning after that, when things become a little bit harder and the finish line feels a little less real, a little less visible. The person you hope to become is as real as the present moment. It's as real when you're excited and motivated as it is when you're discouraged and down. But look around you and understand that it's counterintuitive. As crazy, as frustrating as it might be, the discomfort and uncertainty does not mean you are lost or you've wandered too far. It means you're right where you need to be. It's the little price to be paid every day for monumental change. So as you look out your front door, know that more does exist. Know that it will demand more of you than you've ever given, and know that you are capable of not only meeting but exceeding those demands, and that it will be the most rewarding, incredible, meaningful journey of your life. What is failure? Perhaps when the plan falls apart. Maybe when the project results are underwhelming. No, not quite. When your heart breaks, momentum stops, when your world is shaken at its foundation. No, to put it simply, failure is not going. Failure is the plan never falling apart because you were too scared to make one. Failure is never being underwhelmed by the results of that project because you couldn't find the courage to start. Failure is no heartbreak. No setbacks, no challenge to your worldview because you stood still. I see life's disappointing occurrences as a sort of transaction. Some temporary discomfort in exchange for the very wisdom you were looking for, placed in the palm of your hand. You endure the pain to get the answers. You accept chaos today in exchange for the map that enables you to navigate the terrain. How can something be a failure if it places you right where you need to be? How can something be a failure if it brings you closer to the life you dream of? Maybe we don't look at life as failure versus success, but rather as being stagnant versus being in motion, immobile versus mobile. Maybe it's that simple. If you are moving, regardless of how fast, you're giving yourself a chance to overcome, to collect wisdom and pick up armor. You're giving yourself a chance to be more tomorrow than you are today. And that means we stop accepting the notion that we are standing still for our benefit, justifying that we're only stationary because we're waiting for the right moment. We're here because we need this to be perfect. No, there are a million different ways to get what you want out of life, a million different paths to get you there. None of them require standing still. I already cringe at the amount of time I've wasted waiting for the right time. How I would sit on releasing this or starting that. Oh, it's because I'm a perfectionist. Only to learn that perfectionism is really just fear in disguise. You can sit there and wait and refine and refine and refine. But I'll tell you what, the one who moves, who creates, shares, collects feedback, adjusts, and repeats will have achieved that level of quote-unquote perfection before you feel prepared to acknowledge and share your prototype. It was simply by going that evolution took place. And it took me a long time to grasp this, to understand it, and a part of me didn't want to believe it, as I found it inherently uncomfortable. But life rewards the bold. It always has and always will, calling for a sort of calculated recklessness. Great things are achieved by doers who can put their egos aside and let the world humble them on their way to the next attempt. In Rohn biography on Washington, one of the common themes which I believe made Washington one of the most influential people in the history of mankind was his ability to think, analyze, seek out the opinions of people around him, and then, once decided that was that, he was all in. The rubber had met the road. This was now the way. And I find power in that, as overthinking is so often our undoing, right? Weighing out worst case scenarios, contingency plans, this versus that. When progress requires that we spend a little bit of time deciding which general direction we go, but most importantly, that we start. And I think we've all been guilty of this. Overanalyzing, over-planning. But just like a sailor can't predict the winds, we can't predict all life's variables. Again, it's deciding on a general direction and then trusting ourselves to navigate life's obstacles as they arise. It's finding trends and patterns along the way and doing our best to utilize them as we move forward. There will be points where the road ahead seems overwhelming, the obstacles too abundant to make sense of, where the mind compels you to stay where you are and stare out in awe. It will suggest that what's behind you is safer, that the world you know contains fewer monsters than the world you don't. It might even convince you that whatever ambitions you had weren't really that important, that you could easily live without them. And the longer you stand there, the longer you listen to that voice, the louder it gets. You dismiss it with every step forward. Your momentum is a dagger through the heart of any doubt that once tried to occupy the precious real estate behind your eyes. You don't have to outthink it, outsmart it. You just have to move forward. And what you find is that the mountains you once peered up at weren't all that they seem. A culmination of little hills that can be climbed, manageable rocks that in actuality can be used to propel yourself up the mountainside. There was never a perfect path up. No magic transport to the summit. You might even think to yourself, what a shame that so many are still on the sidelines, waiting to devise their perfect approach, making plans and drawing maps. But that's not how any of this works. To win, you go. To make progress, you move. Knowing full well that you'll find your dead ends. You'll spend time and exhaust energy going down certain paths that don't ultimately lead you where you wanted to go. But what a gift, the ability to reverse course and take the right at the fork instead of the erroneous left you previously took. Your errors are not permanent. Your errors are correctable. Stagnation is what's permanent. Wishing is permanent. Someday is permanent. But right now, that's pure value. So next time you find yourself looking out, as we all do, remind yourself that there are many ways to transform your reality for the better. Many paths to the mountaintop, but there is only one way to assure you never get there, and that is standing still. So trust yourself to figure life out as it comes, to take the pain and extract from it wisdom, to find the strength beyond the uncertainty. Life is giving you everything that is required. Not some things or a few things, everything. All it asks of you is that you dismantle the delusion of perfection and begin.